Okay, it's 5:45, so let's get started. Hello everybody. My name is Fruity Snack,
I'm Pandora's Medane.
and
I'm Beans McGee.
we are coming to you live from the Eorzean Aquarium, here over on Marlborough. This was totally always the plan to be streaming here live from the aquarium, not because Brynhilder is congested right now. But we are currently starting at the aquarium, and we will be touring around through different parts of the world talking about different fish and different fish lore, and we'll be on location, so if you happen to be on Marlborough and would like to try and find us and follow us around, you'll be more than welcome to do that. If not, you can just stick around and watch here on LunarCon Official 2. So let me find my notes and we can. So, back to the slide. Alright, so welcome to our panel on how the trout population was affected by Dalamud's fall and other 100% true lore from fish. So, what we're going to be talking about today is going to be a ton of different lore bits from fish, and this is all stuff that is canon. It's not, well, I say canon, but it's in the log, so it all counts. And we will be showing that to all of you and saying, hey, this is what it can do, and we hope you all enjoy it. Heads up, there are going to be spoilers. This is kind of hard to, it's kind of just hard to miss. Sorry about that again. It's going to be hard to skip over spoilers. There's no way we'll be able to avoid it. So, apologies in advance for that. But to start off, we're gonna start off with something that's a little bit of fun, and we're going to talk about basically dangers to Lalafell. There are a good number of fish that are, guys, how would you put this? Dangerous to Lalafell, predatorial to Lalafell. Like, how would you put this?
Rather hazardous, perhaps.
Very hazardous.
It turns out small size makes it easier to swallow as whole.
Yep.
Alarmingly.
So this is a fish. Digging into fish lore isn't something that's relatively new, but it is something that I know is kind of moved a little bit more mainstream recently. And the one fish that started it all off for all of this was the vegetarian. And the vegetarian is a fish that you can catch in the Ruby Sea, and the description for it is quite long, and I'm leaving this up so that everyone can kind of read through it. And the story behind this is, one, it is, canon, and two, it was written during the 2017, correct me if I'm wrong, Stormblood panel. Stormblood FanFest lore panel with Koji Fox, and they were doing a Mad Lib style fill-in, and my understanding is no one knew what it was for until the vegetarian here came out, and you will see the vegetarian known for eating fish, or Lalafell, and fish.
And if you've ever
Mostly
had
Lalafell.
a description of a fish sent to you, like, oh, look how silly and funny they can be, it was probably this one. Like, this description has basically become a meme in and of itself because it contains a couple of memes.
It's fun because it also implies that at some point somebody genuinely thought that Lalafell were Popados. So we are here on site at the home of the vegetarian, here at the Ruby Sea, and we're also going to talk about some of the other fish that are hazardous to Lalafell. And I'm hoping by the end of this section you're going to have a good, strong appreciation of how brave Lalafell fishers are. As you can see Pando diving off into the water infested by vegetarians and other dangerous fish to Lalafell.
I lived.
It's kind of amazing, right? Because our fish are guild masters. Because let's be real, Sisapu is a guild master at this rate. Are both Lalafell.
Yes, the Fisher Guild in Limsa, for those who don't know, is ran by officially it's ran by Wawalago, but if you do the quest, you'll find that it is in fact probably mostly ran by Sisapu. But it's not just, these predatorial fish, and it's not just straight up eating Lalafell. There are some fish that do go after Lalafell, but don't directly eat them. And one of those is the Gugurusaurus, which you find in ocean fishing. Correct me if I'm wrong, that is the northern Strait of Melthor stop in the Spectral Current. But it is known, and this is from the fishing log, the Gugurusaurus is known to possess a certain low cunning and has been reported to ram smaller craft in the hopes of knocking the occupants overboard. Lalafells are particularly vulnerable to such attacks, and it is advised that they tie a rope around their waist to avoid becoming this wavekin's luncheon. So it's not just like all brute strength, like they're just straight up pretty smart here too.
Yeah, and if you, like me, play a Lalafell and often stand right by the railing, right in one of those little openings in the side of the ship, maybe rethink that the next time you're at the Strait of Melthor.
Yeah, highly recommend standing behind one of the solid blocks.
Definitely small enough to fall through the cracks.
Yeah. And on top of that, inside of, also in the Spectral Current, I don't remember exactly which zone this is, there is the True Barramundi, which is a wavekin whose natural defense is just its straight size. It is simply too large for other wavekin to fit into its mouth. Other than that, it relies on its sheer ordinariness to remain unnoticed by those predators, with the means to make a meal of this docile drifter. It means it's just a boring fish. When you just picture a boring fish, and this is what the True Barramundi is. Except, docile that it is, until it catches the sight of a Lalafell. Then it goes nuts, because it is believed to be their favorite snack. A bit of a fun fact about this, I just recently learned that there is a fish in real life very similar to this, where it's like pretty generally docile, but when it sees something that it likes, it just goes bonkers and gets extremely aggressive.
0 to 100 just because it saw a Lalafell.
There's a ton of people who would probably have similar responses to Lalafell as well.
Because we're cute, right?
Sure.
Because we're cute.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That is a downside to Lalafell. The cuter the Lalafell, the more likely they are to be eaten by fish. And then moving on from ocean fishing, there are a couple of other fish that we find in A Realm Reborn. This includes the fishmonger, and that is the name of the fish, not the somebody who sells fish. But if you catch a fishmonger in the game, or say in the universe of the game, if you were to open it up, you would find that it has fish, sharks, mollusks, and the occasional Lalafell, which is what has earned it its name, the fishmonger, because it eats so many fish. A wide variety of fish. And guys, this is like a really common fish in Lenosha somewhere, so it's not even that bizarre, or it's not even a predatorial fish, if I remember correctly.
And then next up, I guess this isn't really something that eats Lalafell, but
yes, the eunuch crayfish. So this is another fish that is a bit more of not necessarily lethal danger, but more of it's still a hazard. The eunuch crayfish, its lore description specifically states Thought to be born of blood spilled by Azima, the warden. The grip of this tiny, freshwater crustacean's claw is so strong, it has been the end of many a Lalafell's fingers, and more. Take care when handling.
Ugh.
And those, unit crayfish is... That one's in... yeah, that one I believe is in Thanalan. And it's in a shallow water. It's in a shallow pool, too. And it's not even that big. It's like this, like, so the implication here is that, like, if you're walking in to this little pool and you're a Lalafell, you're coming out with missing digits. Because it's such a, like, the pool that you catch it in is so shallow and bare that it's just really dangerous.
Yeah, and you can find them in the Shroud, Lanasha, and Thanalan, so nowhere's safe.
No worries.
Everywhere. Yeah, not quite as lethal, but definitely extremely painful.
And moving on, there's also in Heaven's Ward, there are a couple of Lalafell-eating Lalafell-eating fish. Shadow Whisker and Scale Ripper, who is the bigger version of Shadow Whisker. These are both freshwater fish found in the Hundred Throws in the Dravanian Forelands. And they have been known to not only eat Lalafell, the smaller versions, but the Scale Ripper, the bigger version of it, will actually go after dragons. So I guess maybe we could have extended this to Ara as well, even though they're kind of not really dragons, but, you know, it's a fish, they might confuse them. So maybe just be careful if you're a fish, or if you're fishing, because there are tons of dangerous fish out there.
Indeed.
I think the extra interesting thing is Lalafell canonically have a very long naval history. Like, they sail a lot. They're from the South Sea Isles. So what kind of a person do you have to be to live in a world where a ton of fish can eat you and then choose to go sailing?
I know, I
Right?
mean, you have to, like, kind of think of the bravery of Lalafell, who are sailing seas with things that literally go crazy at the sight of them. So it's kind of wild to think, like, this is what people actually, like, this is what they did. Like, the stress levels of Lalafell, I can understand things now.
Oh yeah, Yoshi P's comment that maybe Lalas are so small because they're under a lot of pressure.
That's
They're very
it.
stressed
That's it.
about getting eaten.
We have now figured out why Lalafell are so small. It is because everything wants to eat them, and they're always under pressure.
Now, on the other hand, some members of the fishing community are convinced that Lalafells have better luck with fishing because we ourselves are bait. So maybe that explains why Lalafells have such a long naval history. They know the value of throwing yourself out there.
I'm standing next to two Lalafell right now. Being not a Lalafell, being quite the opposite size of a Lalafell, both of you have fished greatly. Do you feel like you have had better luck than others?
Honestly,
I can't
yeah.
speak to that because I actually fantasiaed after catching all the fish.
Oh, cheating, huh? Yeah, I think I got all of them pretty fast. There were a few that I was unlucky on, but I think many more that I was very lucky on. So maybe it works.
So what we're gonna do now is move on to, we've been talking about Lalafell, and Lalafell still have a very strong history in fish lore. On top of what Beans was saying is, they're a very naval, race. Early on, they're eaten a lot. They show up actually with the Allagan. And the Allagans are interesting in this sense because, when you hear about Allagans, you usually are thinking of, like, war and all these other things that are going on. But there's a lot that we actually got from the Allagans from fish that tells a different story. That tells something that's a little bit different than just, they're always dealing with war. They're always dealing with, trying to take over the world. And one of these fish is the crystal pigeon. And it is a turtle. It is not a pigeon, it's just a turtle. And it is found in the Hemisphere, which is in the, let me bring up the map, the eastern part of Az's Law. And it was used in, I have the log up here on the screen. It was actually used during free time. When the Allagans were not off doing their weird machinations and making things and trying to take over the world, in their spare time, they would shoot crystal pigeons, which, if anyone, if you've watched the Olympics, you know about clay pigeons. This is crystal pigeons. And these are notorious and flying around all the time, and they would practice their marksmanship with it. So they weren't always doing war stuff, but of all the things that we've been able to find about Allagan fish, it's still kind of weird.
Yeah. I mean, I personally have never shot turtles out of the sky, so a little weird.
It does seem like they feel the need to bioengineer something for every single problem, instead of just making like a regular clay pigeon.
Well,
They had to bioengineer a flying turtle.
Yeah, so let's talk about bioengineering here for a second, because there are a couple of fish that the Allagans did bioengineer that stood out, and that would be aetherochemical compound number 123 and the bigger version number 666. And 123 reads as just a biologically engineered biomass found in Az's Law. But unlike anything else on Eorzea, compound 123 is thought to be of another Allagan's Empire's failed chimeric creation. This creature seems to be harmless enough, feeding only on the tiny water lice that inhabits Az's Law's aether chemical pools. Its outer hide, however, has given many a naturalist pause, as it bears a texture almost identical to that of a Lalafell's skin. Then, aether chemical compound 666, which is the bigger version of 123, like physically bigger, a little bit more evolved, it reads, when a specimen of, at what the time was thought to be compound 123, it began sprouting tiny, decidedly Lalafellian hands. No fewer than 3 sons of St. Coinoc naturalists turned in their resignations with the organization and have since disappeared from the public eye. So I was reading about the Allagan chimeric creations, and this is something that they've done a lot of, to my understanding. And for the people who have done a lot of lore work with the Allagans, I'm still getting into them, so please correct me on anything that's wrong with that. But they really liked their chimera, right? And this just seems to be another one of them. And so among the fishers, there is that joke that aether chemical compound 123 and 666 were like the first Lalafell. I don't know. What do you guys think on that?
I think it's the other way around. I think they started as Lalafell and got turned into whatever they are now. Because Shadowbringers has the dwarves, right? Well, the Allagan Empire didn't exist on the first.
Oh,
but
that's
there
a
are
good
Lalas.
point.
Yeah.
So I think the Lalas weren't biologically engineered, but the Allagans definitely did something weird to them.
Are there void scent not void scent Allagans, void scent Lalafell? Like, do we know of anything that's akin to void scent Lalafell?
Oh, you mean like
Small statured void scent?
a version in the 13th?
Yeah.
Not that I know of.
I mean, imps, perhaps?
That would be a fun implication. That really just I'm sure there would be a lot of people who aren't necessarily fans of Lalafell who would love to be hearing them canonically called imps.
Yeah, I was gonna say some people would argue that all Lalafell are void sent.
Unfortunately.
That's kind of one of the things that we're learning with fish lore now. Is I know that there are people who have looked at kind of at fish lore, but from like perspective of coming from like the fishing side of things, there's some implications here that fish provide that haven't been introduced, say, necessarily in the story. And we'll cover. I'll go back into the. We'll be digging into that, digging into a few of those here in a little bit. But that's something that I know has really, when we've been looking at the fish lore, that's something that's come up. Is there's a bunch of stuff here, and you go, oh, the story says like thing A, but the fish say thing B. And it's been interesting trying to find that balance between the two of like which one is more canon. And we know that the fish lore is written with care. Like it's not just thrown together. Like we know the developers genuinely look at what they're writing for the fish and how it's being translated and stuff. So I like to think that they work in harmony together, but there's a lot of fish that we haven't been able to find that balance yet.
Yeah. I mean, it is important to note that a lot of the fish lore, just like the Eorzea Encyclopedia Eorzea, is written from the perspective of people in universe. And so sometimes in the story, we find out new breaking things that would change people's perception of what really happened in universe. And some of those descriptions were written before that story beat. So that's what's happening some of the time. Some of the time.
Yeah, every time that they either like a new fish is added or something comes up, we actually learn a little bit more about fishing, which is weird. Especially through the fishing quests, like they focus a lot on the fishing quest. It's usually not like a side story. It's actually something that enriches how fishing works in game and how it kind of exists in this ecosystem. And there's a few other fish too that come up that kind of support that. And those would be, we'll start kind of talking about axolotls. That was the word I was looking for. There are axolotls in As Is Law, where we are now over at the Papistry. There's the tiny axolotl and then the 100-eye axolotl, which is a rare mutation of the tiny axolotl and is the bigger fish, and it has a ton of eyes as its defensive mechanism. And so we're looking at that and we're like, okay, that's fine. And then Endwalker happened. And there's that one scene in Elpis where you first meet Hermes and Meteon, and what are they working on? Axolotl. And so going into this, we had this idea of, axolotls were just a thing that kind of existed. Lore provided that, they were distant relatives of axolotls that resided in Lower Eorzea, which I believe we don't have access to right now, like the proper Lower Eorzea where these guys are from. Correct? Am I correct in assuming that?
Assuming I followed that, I think
Yes.
so, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, just making sure. I want to double check. But then the axolotls showed up in Elpis. And so now there was this weird implication because Elpis and As Is Law, at least, to me, and I know a few other people, they have parallels. They're both kind of like those big experimental spots. They're this big place for very powerful beings to do basically experiments and to explore things. And they both are part of civilizations that eventually fall apart. And so this is going back to like kind of like that A and B thing is, okay, well, originally we had A. Like, okay, axolotls, they just came up from Lower Eorzea. and then B came around, and now there's the implication that we don't actually know if the axolotls ever came out of Elpis as they did. And so is there a parallel between Elpis and As is Law, like metaphorically? Um and or axolotls kind of like that constant between the two? Like what do you guys I think we talked about this the other day. What were your thoughts on that?
Hmm.
I think it's more because Hermes was Ammon, who was the overseer. Was he the overseer here? He was either the overseer or
Yeah.
very highly ranked here.
Yeah.
So maybe even if he wasn't consciously recreating his memories, maybe part of that was why there are axolotls here. Perhaps he introduced them or encouraged them here because that's what he would have remembered in Elpis.
So my thought right now is there are much like bigger axolotl like enemies in the game, and so maybe axolotls evolved into those enemies, and then separately, Amon was like, "But I remember this different version," and so we now have two axolotls at very different like size and evolution stages, because one was created by Amon and one is an evolution of the whatever came from Elpis.
Yeah. I think, kind of thinking that there's definitely hints of Elpis in the fish. And I feel like once we get more big fish coming out of Elpis, because right now there are none, maybe in 6.2 we'll get our first one, we might actually start seeing parallels between the two. And I think that that's going to be kind of one of those tying connectors beyond just Amon. It's saying, all right, there's Amon, and then there's like the axolotls, and then there's maybe uh like our own Opabenia, which is weird, and Allagan blade sharks and crystal pigeons. Like maybe there are going to be parallels in Elpis that we'll be able to draw. But we have about 18 minutes left, and we have a ton more to do. So what we're going to jump into now is rapid fire fish lore. This is all stuff that doesn't necessarily fit into other categories that we'll be talking about, and it's going to have a ton of little stuff here. So Beans and Pando, while I get us over to the next spot. If you guys would like to get started with the shell fracture kelp, Beans, you were the one that introduced this to me. So would you read out the description for shell fracture kelp?
Yeah, sure. Shell fracture kelp is a marine plant that grows in great beds off of Cracked Shell Beach over in the First. It wraps its meaty leaves around marine mollusks, providing protection in exchange for stability. However, as the kelp grows, its grip tightens and the shells shatter. Below the water, as above, we always hurt the ones we love. And that is read word for word from the fish log, which kind of just makes you want to ask if the translators are okay.
Is that
You
kelp
know,
okay?
Yeah, is
is
the
the
kelp
kelp okay? Why did they give the kelp depression? Um,
There's a lot to unpack for that one, and I'm that's the only one that's kind of written like that too, if I remember correctly. Like it's not even like there's not like a common thing among kelps where it's all like they're all depressed. It's or something. It's literally just that one, right?
And then, if you've ever wondered why Terrifying Way is named Terrifying Way, like what's so scary about this fish, its lore description is that a loprit was once nearly devoured whole after mistaking the cephalopod's tentacles for ears. They know not how fortunate they were to run screaming away when they did, for this wavekint has been observed digesting its prey slowly and to all appearances painfully through its translucent body. Ugh.
And if you want to go on to its bigger version,
Yeah, so the big fish version of the same one is this curious cephalopod extends its limbs in often successful attempts to threaten those who approach. To wit, a brave loprit once attempted to stare it down in a clash of wills, but was tragically brought low when they could no longer bear the forbidding look of the creature's eyes and ear-like protrusions.
so basically, don't mess with forbidding or terrifying way if you are a loperit, and don't get into a staring contest with either of them because they don't have eyelids.
Yeah,
Yeah, they are
apparently
very
liquids are
cute.
also not safe from fish.
Yeah, loporits are, I mean, I guess if you're just
They're
small.
kind of the same size, yeah. So I guess Lalafell should also be cautious around these two.
So coming up next would be Ondotaker. Ondotaker is a fish that you can get in the Tempest, and the lore behind this one's actually interesting in the sense that it might be wrong. The lore for the Ondotaker implies that it basically kills any Ondo in the Tempest that goes into its waters and leaves behind a crimson cloud. Is what they say in the lore, or in the log. But we also know from talking with other Ondos and other side quests that Ondo blood is actually blue. So not sure if this is right or not. The one thing that I do want to point out is it is correct in the Japanese version. So we think we think that it is in fact a translation error, but it is something that we wanted to point out. The next guy, the fourth one from left to right, second one on the second one from the left, that would be Problematicus. And Problematicus is one of my personal favorites. Not only is it the largest fish in the game, measuring at over, what is it, like almost 100 feet or something like that you pull out of a literal volcano. It is, in fact, the one of the few fish that has caused scientists at a natural symposium to go into fisticuffs and just started fighting over whether or not it was in fact a fish or not. And that is how it got its name, the Problematicus, because it caused a problem. Shonosaurus, or go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say Shonosaurus is very much related because it also caused some problems at a naturalist symposium, which is very specific, but it is a thing that happens in fish lore. Naturalist Marcet Mani, this is the NPC at the top of the log up in the Shroud, has presented a thesis claiming that this fish is not in fact a cloudkin and it is a scalekin. At the time, she was pretty much laughed out of the event, but Shonisaurus's tooltip does call it a legendary scalekin, which suggests that she was actually right in the end.
I love both of those just because it mimics real life and people arguing over the classification of not just fish, but pretty much everything under the sun. Um,
Yeah, and
just
that's
very real.
we know that a lot of the fish lore is written from a scholarly point of view. So you kind of get it as like job or journal. Thank you. Journal type words. I'm reading ahead here and I'm confusing myself because I want to make sure we cover everything here in the next 12 minutes. All right, so the last one here for the rapid fire is Cindersmith, which this is a lava snail, which is that closely resembles those that are in the deep sea, such as the Armorer or Sabaton, leading naturalists to hypothesize that at one time the sea levels were much higher, and that when the waters receded, snails left atop the mountain began evolving separately. Now, this is going to lead us into the thing that everyone wants to hear about, is, the calamities. How did the calamities affect fish? We're going to talk about two calamities. The two-ish most recent ones. The 7th and the 6th. And we're going to start with the 6th. Everyone's kind of been up in this, everyone's probably flown by this in Upper Lenosha. They've probably seen this giant skeleton. If you do a quest line, very short quest line, it's like 2 quests, you find out that people think that it is Thalos. It is in fact marked on the map as Thalos. And this isn't actually something that I think is correct. And really quickly, I actually do not think that this is Thalos. I do not think that it is the deity that came, that was born of Lemlian and brought the waters to the world. I actually think that it is a Nepto dragon, and I will explain why. So basically, you don't know, there were two serpents that were born of Lemlian, the deity that all Limsons basically follow, who brought these two serpents brought the waters to the worlds. Notably, they did not bring fish, though. They brought the waters. The fish was by Nofika. But anyways, there is a small fish. There is a fish named Little Thalos. And this is the namesake of the deity, and it has a description that states, despite the modifier, the Little Thalos is anything but small. Compared to the Thalos of legend, even the largest sea serpents would be deemed little, as is the case with most deep ocean fish. The body is composed of thick wax-like fat and little else, making it an unpleasant addition to any dinner table. Fun fact, Little Thalos is based on a real-life oarfish. You may have seen this in Animal Crossing or on various places online. So anyways, there's another fish named Neptodragon. And the Neptodragon is canonically the larger version of a Little Thalos. So, this is where things start getting weird, so follow me. Just hang with me here. Neptodragon is the final fish that you have to catch in a quest line called the Feast of Famine. And in the Feast of Famine, it is said that Neptodragon only appears after major natural disasters or calamities. That is the only time that it's ever been seen. So, what exactly would have been the last time that this would have happened? Well, it would have been right after the 7th Umbral Calamity. And we got to see what a large Neptodragon kind of looks like. And you'll see they kind of look a little similar. Bear with me. But on the left is the Neptodragon. So, the Neptodragon, we know, shows up after calamities. And from Cindersmith, we know that the water levels were high. So, if we go all the way back 1,500 years to the 6th Umbral Calamity, which for those who follow calamities will know is the Water Calamity. And the Water Calamity was due to the rejoining of, I forget which star it was, but it was the water one, and so we got flooded with water aspected aether. And we know that from the Studium fishing quests in Endwalker, fish are extremely are very aware of aether currents, and that's how spectral currents in ocean fishing come up. And we know that they get affected by this, and we know that a Little Thalos is just a bigger version of a Neptodragon, and that usually comes after calamities. So my theory, and this is all kind of where it all lines up, this Neptodragon that you see on the left is a smaller version of something that you would actually see on the right. This guy isn't actually Thalos. It would in fact be a large Neptodragon from the 6th Umbral Calamity 1,500 years ago that was supercharged due to the rejoining and the flood of water aspected aether. And because we know that fish are affected by aether, and that they can grow in size and act differently, that's my theory. If you even go back to 1.0, there are facts that will support this idea, because this guy was originally underground, he was buried, it was all part of the water. So the last bit that we're going to go and talk about now is Dalamud's fall and the trout population. So, go ahead. Someone gonna say something?
Well, you may have seen this comic already.
Yes.
It made the rounds.
Yeah, so the artist, Absolemo, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but there's their credits down there. So simply, they posted this, and I was wondering, I think I went to Beans and Pando, I went to you guys with this, and I was like, was the trout population actually affected by the fall of Dalamud? And short answer, yes. It was. And here in this, and I talked to the artist about it, and apparently this wasn't intentional, but it was in fact something that did happen. And we looked into it, And there was a fish called the warm water trout, which is actually located in the same area that that the Thalos skeleton is. Push myself over here to this so you can see it. So the warm water trout, you'll notice that it says that it actually shows up in Thanalan, and it is only available in South and East Thanalan, but its prime locations are here in Lenosha. In fact, you can only catch it in Lenosha. You can only catch it in these two spots right here in Oakwood and Fool's Falls, with the big version being in Fool's Falls. But if you look at where it is in Thanalan, you will find, if I bring up the map, so it has to travel after the 7th Emerald Calamity. It traveled from here, and it somehow ended up down here. This is called out. Like I was saying in the last slide, it started showing up after the Calamity in such locations as Thanalan. So, did the fall of Dalamud actually affect the trout population? Yes. Was it negative? No. If you hate trout and you live in Thanalan, maybe it would be bad for you. But in general, it was that's it. It just got up
Migration.
and moved. Yeah. So that's the thing, though, is we don't actually know how. We don't know like what the mechanic is or the reason as to why they came down here. That's what we don't know. Presumably, it's because it got warmer. Assuming that with all the aether that came up around the Battle of Cartano, which I believe is somewhere around here. That's the wrong slide. Which I believe is somewhere around here, just north of, around Mordona. I believe with the aether, it probably just got everything a little bit warmer. And they just decided to move, but go ahead.
Bahamut was a fire aspected primal, so it does make sense that everything would get warmer.
Yeah. So it also only appears in the South and East Thanalan in certain waters, which I believe was the Ugarim River, which basically goes around the Burning Wall, near Drybone, which is massively filled with aether from the Bahamut blast. So we're not 100% sure exactly what the full mechanism is, but in my mind, this was the effect of Dalamud's fall.
It's very fun because almost everything else got worse after Dalamud crashed into the Eorzea, but the trout sure won. They won out big.
And the other one that came out big was the Lenosian jelly. I went through a bunch of fish, and the Lenosian jelly was the only other fish to get called out as a affected by the population or by Dalamud's fall, and that is something that you will see reflected if you go ocean fishing. You will see there's Lenosian jellyfishes everywhere. There's a title tied to it. And Pando, I believe you pointed out that was also the same reason that we see jellyfish on land outside of Limsa.
Yeah, my pet theory is that they got supercharged by aether or something, wound up on land, and now low-level adventurers have to fight them.
Yep. So that's the fish lore for now. We crammed in a lot. We had to kind of skip over a few things, but that was everything for that. So if you want to talk to us more about fish lore, here's where you can find us. Here's everything. You can come over to the Eorzean Aquarium. We are an official hangout spot for LunarCon. We'll be open all week, and I mean we're always open, but we'll be there all weekend. And finally, we have other fishing panels coming up in a little bit, about an hour and a half, is being a marine biologist in Final Fantasy XIV, what it's like to find fish in the game. Don't want to miss that, because a lot of the fish that you find, we can't data mine. So we have this big undertaking to figure out, amongst others on Saturday and Sunday. So hope you enjoyed it. Thank you all for tuning in. Enjoy your LunarCon, and maybe see you at the aquarium.
Thanks for coming.
Yes, thank you everyone for coming.